Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Let's get into this bikini bottom tutorial. To make the bottoms, I'll be using Lion Brand's Nubu yarn, and I would classify this as a level 2 or sport weight yarn. And in order to make our stitches nice and tight, I'll be using a 3.0 millimeter hook. And lastly, for a little bit of fun, I'll be using some wooden beads that I picked up at Joann's. I believe these are about 8 millimeter or 10 millimeter. I'm gonna start off with my slip knot. And to make size small bottoms, I'm going to begin by chaining 12 plus 2 for turning. So here's my 12, I'm going to chain 2 more. And going into the third stitch for my hook, I'm going to begin by placing double crochets. There's my first double, finding my next stitch in the row, insert, pull up a loop, with 2 on, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. And now I'm just going to work my way down my row, placing 1 double crochet into each of the loops. And here at the very last stitch in my row, I'm going to finish my double crochet. And from here I can chain 2 and turn my work. And like always with my patterns, the chain 2 does not count as a stitch. For my pattern, I'll be working from the middle of the crotch outward. So this first row here is the very center of our bottoms. To start my second row, I'll continue by placing 1 double crochet into the top of each stitch. So no increases yet. I'm just going to yarn over and find that very first stitch right here. Insert. And there's my first double for that row. And I'll just continue to work 1 double crochet into each stitch, nothing fancy. And back here again at the end of my row, don't forget to pick up that very last stitch. You don't want to drop any stitches. So there's my second row completed. I'm going to chain 2 again and turn my work. And now I'm just going to repeat that same exact process for a total of 8 rows. So I already have my first 2 rows completed here, and now I'm going to work 6 more rows. Alright, so as you can see, I have finished up my 8 rows. And now to begin my 9th row, I'm going to start adding increases at the beginning and the end of each row. And if you've been watching my videos for a while, you know that I like to add my increases on the second stitch from the beginning and the second stitch from the end. I don't typically like to add my increases on the very corners because it makes it look a little bit raggedy. But if that's how you like to work your stitches, go for it. So to begin row 9, I've already chained my 2. Into that very first stitch, I'm going to work 1 double crochet. And here at my second stitch is where I'm going to be placing my 2 double crochets. So I'm going to go into that loop, make my first double crochet, and going right back into that same stitch for a second. And there's my increase for the 9th row. Now I'm just going to work the rest of the row like normal and place 1 double crochet into each stitch until I reach 2 stitches at the end of my row. I'm just chugging along here. Oops. This yarn is a little bit tricky to use because it keeps splitting, but I kind of put up with it because I like the texture. Just working my way downtown. All right. And now as you guys can see here, I have 2 stitches left. So right here in my second to last stitch, I'll be placing those 2 double crochets. There's my first. I'm gonna go right back in and add my increase into that same stitch. And now with 1 stitch left in the row, finish with 1 double crochet. So don't forget, guys, that you're adding an increase at the beginning and the end of your row. I'm going to chain 2 and turn my work. To make my 10th row, I'll repeat the same exact steps that I used for row 9. So at my very first stitch here, I'm going to place 1 double crochet. And here at my second stitch, I'll be placing my increase of 2 double crochet. So there's my first, and right back into that same stitch for my second. And now just continue to work the row like normal until you have 2 stitches remaining, and there you're going to add your increase again. And here at the end of my 10th row, I have my 2 stitches left. So at my second to last stitch, I'll be placing my increase of 2 double crochet. There's the first one. We're going to go right back into that same stitch. There's the second. And now in that very last stitch, I can place my 1 double crochet and call it a day. And there is my 10th row. I'm going to work a total of 10 rows with those increases. So again, I already have my 2 rows of increases completed. I'm going to add 8 more rows, adding the increase at the beginning and the end of my rows. All right, so I'm back here again, and as you can see, I have finished adding my increases for my 10 rows in total. And now I need to start working on adding decreases. So picking up where I've left off, I've already chained my 2 and I can turn my work. And now this is going to be the 19th row for me. And from this point forward, for the rest of the bikini, I will be working decreases on the beginning of the row and at the end of my row. And just as before, where I worked my increase into my second stitch in the row, I'll be working my decrease in the second stitch in the row as well. So I'm going to yarn over and go into that very first stitch and place 1 double crochet. So here at my second stitch, I can yarn over and go into that stitch, pull up a loop, pull through 2, yarn over, go into the next stitch, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and pull through 3. And I'll just work the row like normal until I have 3 stitches left in my row. Alright, so I'm coming up here to the end of my row and I have my 3 stitches left. Into this third to last stitch is where I'm going to begin working that decrease again. So I've yarned over, I'm going to insert, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and with 2 on the hook I'm going to yarn over again, go into my second to last stitch, so going into that next stitch, pulling up a loop with 4 on, yarn over and pull through 2, and you should have 3 on at this point, yarn over and pull through all 3. And there's my decrease again. You can kind of see the work slanting. And now into that very last stitch in the row, don't forget to pick it up. I'm going to insert and work 1 regular double crochet. And there we have it. I'm now working decreases at the beginning and end of every row. At the end of my row, I can chain 2 and turn my work. And now I just continue with that same pattern. So here for row 20, I'm going to place 1 double crochet into that first stitch. And now here for that second stitch in the row, begin by working your decrease. So I'm going to go into that stitch, pull through 2, yarn over again, go into the next stitch, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and then pull through 3. And as you can see again, that work is slanting just a little bit, so there's my decrease. And now I'm just going to work the row like normal with 1 double crochet into each stitch. And I'll continue like this until I have 3 stitches left in the row. Back at the end of my row, I've got my 3 stitches here. I'm going to work that decrease. And finish with 1 regular double crochet. So as you can kind of see here, the work is starting to slant inward, which means my decreases are going well, and I'm just going to continue like this for a few more rows and I'll meet you back. Alright guys, so I'm popping back on here to show you my decrease rows, and I finished up this first section of the bikini. So to show you guys my work so far, I have decreased on every single row for a total of 7 rows. And now for this next step in the bikini, I'll be working my rows on these decrease sections right here. So where the work starts to slant inward is where I'm going to be placing the next few stitches. So I've got my work turned sideways so that I can begin placing my stitches on this side part here. And picking up where I've left off, I'm going to chain 2 here at this corner. And now I'm just going to begin by placing double crochets all along this section until I reach that corner. You want to do your best to make sure that you're spacing them out pretty evenly. So right here into this first stitch, I'm going to go in and place a double crochet. Finding a next spot right here, I'm going to insert. And just working my way down this row, finding little spots to place my stitches. And the amount of stitches that you want to place right here is completely up to you. Just try your best to not bunch it up and make it too packed in there. So this is what this section should look like. Just going to keep adding stitches. So far for this little section here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 stitches. And right here at this tip of this corner, I'm going to place 1 more stitch, and this should make it 15 double crochets for my body size. And that is the first row of the edging of our work. To start row 2, I can chain my 2 and turn my work. And to work row 2, I'll begin using my decreases at the beginning of the row and at the end of my row. So following that same technique as earlier, I'm going to add a regular double crochet into that very first stitch. And now from here I can begin my decrease. So going into the second stitch in the row, I'm going to insert, pull up a loop and pull through 2. Now I'm going to yarn over again, go into that next stitch for a decrease, pull through 2, and with 3 on the hook, I'll pull through all 3. And there's my decrease at the beginning of the row. And now I can just work regular double crochets 1 into each stitch until I have my 3 stitches at the end of my row. So this is the same exact technique that I showed you guys earlier. All right, so right here, if you guys can see, I have 1, 2, 3 stitches left. And picking up this next stitch to finish the decrease. And then pull through all 3. So I have my cute little decrease right there. And now I have 1 more stitch left in the row. And I'm just going to work that regular double crochet at the end. So there is my second row, and if you can see, it's starting to slant inward, which is exactly what we want. To begin row 3, I will be working regular 1 double crochet into each stitch. So this third row, just like your first row, is not going to have any decreases. So each stitch is just receiving 1 double crochet. At the end of my row and finishing my stitch, I can chain 2 and turn the work. And now to make the fourth row, I'm going to go back to using my decreases again. So into that very first stitch, place 1 regular double crochet. And then here at my very next stitch, begin working that decrease. Going into the next stitch to finish. And there's my decrease. And again, just work that row like normal with 1 double crochet until you have your 3 stitches left. And here again at the end of my row, work that decrease. And back into that very last stitch. Don't forget a regular double crochet. So by now, I hope you guys are starting to catch on to the pattern that's happening here. From here, I'm just going to continue to alternate rows with decreases at the beginning and end of my row. So since I just had a decrease on this row, my next row, I'll work regular double crochets. And then the following row after that, I'll go back to using my decreases. And I'll meet you back here after a few more rows. All right, so I'm hopping back on here to show you guys that I have my 10 rows so far completed of the decrease on every other row. And now I'm getting to a part where I can't really decrease on both ends because I have an odd number of stitches. So to do this 11th row, I'm going to go into that first stitch like normal. And then here at my second stitch in the row, I'll have that decrease. And then here at the very last 2 stitches, I'm just going to work regular double crochets. So I'm not decreasing on the left side of my work because I don't really have the right amount of stitches for it. I'm just going to work 2 regular double crochets. And now I'm here at the part where I have a total of 4 stitches left for the next row. So for row 12, I can chain 2. And work this next row with regular double crochets. And now I think I'm just going to add 1 more row of regular double crochets. So right here, we're just trying to give the edge of our bikini a little bit of length. And now that I have this first edge done, I can cut off my yarn and tie in a few knots. And now that I've shown you guys how to do this first side of the bikini, you can attach your yarn here at this opposite corner and repeat the same exact steps that we have over here. So if you're following the same exact sizing that I have here in this video, you're going to attach your yarn at the corner and place 15 double crochets all along this edge. If your sizing is a little bit different from mine and you placed more double crochets along this edge, like 16 or 18, mimic the same process on the other side. So if you have 16 double crochet here, place 16 double crochet on the other side. And just remember to work your decreases on every other row until you have a few rows left here. And then once you can no longer decrease, don't forget to add a few rows of regular double crochet. Alright, so I have finally finished up the other side of this bikini, and now it's time to start working on the other panel. Now, in order to start working on the other panel of our bikini bottoms, you're going to repeat the same exact process that we have here, but first we're going to begin by attaching our yarn here at the center of the crotch. And depending on how much coverage you want your bikini to have, there are 2 different ways that you can go about making the second panel. So if you want your bikini to have more coverage, you can follow the same exact steps that we have here, But if you want the front panel of your bikini to have a little bit more skin showing, you can follow the pattern that I'm gonna have here. And this is the second way that you can make the other panel. So like I said, right here at this very corner, I'm going to attach on my new yarn. All right, so my first few rows are going to mimic the exact same steps that I have here on the previous panel. So I believe that I have 8 rows of the regular double crochet. And after I have my 8 regular rows of the double crochet done, here is where I'm going to change up my pattern just a little bit. On the previous panel, I increased on every single row for a total of 9 rows. But in order to make this front panel a little bit thinner, I'm going to add increases on every other row. And for this 9th row, I'll begin by placing 1 regular double crochet into that first stitch. And then here at my 2nd stitch is where I'll place my increase. So there's my first one. I'm going to go right back into that same stitch for that increase. And now I'll just continue to work that row like normal, placing 1 double crochet until I'm left with 2 stitches in the row. And then don't forget, at my 2nd to last stitch, I'll add my increase again. So the pattern that we're using for this front panel is very similar to what we worked up for the back. The only difference is that I'm going to alternate my increases to every other row instead of increasing on every single row. I'm just going to continue that pattern for 9 rows again in total. So here at my 2nd to last stitch, I'll place my increase. There's my 1, going right back in for 2. And into this very last stitch here, I'll finish with 1 regular double crochet. So that's my 9th row. I'm going to chain 2. And now to begin row 10, I'm only going to be working with 1 double crochet into each stitch. So for every other row, there is no increase. And now to work the 11th row, I'm going to go back to using my increases at the beginning and end of my row. Alright guys, so now I'm popping back on here to show you guys the progress of the front panel. And as you can see, adding those increases on every other row compared to every single row makes the bikini a lot more narrow for that front panel. So I followed the same amount of rows, adding increases on every other row for a total of 9 rows. And then for 7 rows, I had my decreases on every single row. And now all that's left is to add on these little side portions for the bikini. So I'll begin by going into that very first stitch space right here. And now I'm just going to carefully place my double crochets along this edging. Alright, and now that I'm back here at the very end of my row, I believe I've worked about 15 double crochets all along that decrease edge. So from here I can follow that same exact pattern that we used before. I'm going to chain 2 and turn my work. And again, in order to work these little side panels of the bikini, every other row will have a decrease at the beginning and end of my row. So since that first row was just regular double crochets, I'm going to go into that very first stitch here and place 1 regular double crochet as well. And don't forget that here at my 2nd stitch is where I'll work my decrease. So I'm going into that next stitch, picking it up, pulling it through, yarning over and going into the next stitch again for a decrease, pull through 2, with 3 on, pull through 3. And now I'm just going to work the rest of the row by placing 1 double crochet into each stitch until I have my 3 stitches at the end of my row. And back here again at the end of my row, I have my 3 stitches left. I'm going to work my decrease. And then finish with 1 double crochet. And for row 3, I'm just working 1 double crochet into the top of each stitch. And you guys guessed it, again, this row is going to have my decreases. So working 1 regular double crochet into that first stitch. Into my second and third stitch in the row, I'll have my decrease stitch. Now just work like normal. And don't forget to finish your row off with your decrease as well. So here's my third to last stitch. I'm going to work that decrease. And into that very last stitch, 1 regular double crochet. Alright, so now that I've already shown you how to work those first few rows of your side panel, you can just continue on like normal, following that same pattern that I showed you earlier with the back side panel. And once I get both my side panels finished up, I'll hop back on here and show you guys how I finish up with my lacing and my beads. Alright, so I have finally finished up that front and back panel, and now the last thing that we have to do is make our side ties. And I'm going to begin by making about a 2-foot long chain. Alright, so just to quickly show you, this is what the first side of the bikini tie looks like. I just have a very basic chain strung through the edge of the bikini. So now that I have the first side all completed, I will show you how to match it on the other side. So I'm going to begin by grabbing my chain and folding it in half to find my halfway point. And now I'm just going to grab my hook and poke it through the corner of the bikini. And now I'm just going to wrap the chain around my hook and pull the chain through the edge of the bikini. And now I'm going to grab the other panel, find the other edge, and repeat the same thing. I'm going to poke it through, grab my chain, wrap it around my hook, and pull it through that edge. Alright, so that first step is done. Now I can grab my beads. Alright, and now to get those beads onto my chain, I'm actually just going to grab a very tiny and precise crochet hook. And I just went ahead and picked up a 1.1mm hook because I figured out that the hole for my beads requires a very tiny crochet hook. So now I'm just going to take my bead, thread it onto my crochet hook, grab the very end of my chain, and weave it through the bead. And now that I have it on, I can shift it down my chain until it hits the edge of my work. I'm going to go ahead and grab my other bead color. Repeat the same process of grabbing the edge of my chain and pulling it through. And again, I can just shift it down my chain. So now I have those 2 little beads resting against the edge of my work. I'm going to go ahead and thread on my other 2 beads to the other side of my panel. Perfect, and now that I have those beads on both sides of my panel, I can thread the rest of my chain through my work. So coming here to my first panel, I'm going to turn it around, poke my needle through the other corner of my work, wrap my chain around the hook again, and pull it on through. So there's that very first side. Again, I'm going to grab the other panel and find the other corner here. Poke my hook through, wrap the chain on the hook, and weave it back. And now I have the edging of my bikini all finished up. And now all that's left is to tie a cute little knot for the hips. All right, and now my bikini is finally finished up. And I hope that you guys love this too and you decide to make one for yourself.